Hey guys, Louie here, driving to work this morning. Got a little view of the blue skies in California, although it's registering at 55 degrees Fahrenheit at about 9 in the morning. So I was thinking a little bit about the generations, right? What have the different generations experienced? And when you talk to the average person today who is not a stacker, they seem to believe that everything is okay, that the world is pretty much on track, the United States is on track, and they don't really expect anything bad to happen. When the market goes down 5,000 points, they stay in. They really are not seeing the debt as a problem. All they're focused on is their daily life and their job and whatever hobbies they may have, taking care of their family, et cetera, et cetera. We all get very busy. And I know I was like that for many, many years, just staying in the groove and doing my thing. But I wonder why it is that people don't think that bad things can happen. I was contemplating last night the major depression, recessions of the 20th century. And from time to time, I think about my father, Losing Louie, Sr. And Louie was born around 1908. Yes, my father would be about 110 years old if he was living today. But he was born around 1908. And during the 20s, things were pretty good. That's when my family was living in California, recently immigrated from Italy. And my dad was a little guy. What he saw, right? Everybody thought everything was okay in 1908, in the teens, in the 20s. The markets were going up, and it seemed like the world was on track. Well, what happened to that generation? Well, very similar to right now, the markets were being propped up and inflated. Herbert Hoover was engaging in protectionism and stimulus and trying to keep a hard Republican line on the economy. The world was weak, right? Recession had hit the world, and there were starting to be hard times in the world. But the United States thought that they could isolate themselves from it with tariffs and protectionism. And long story short, up comes the late 20s and the early 30s, and we're launched into depression. So what was that like? Well, the world went from everybody kind of working and feeling some level of prosperity into massive unemployment, right? When the stock market crashed, the middle class and many of the upper class who were not forewarned lost quite a bit of their money. And then they lost their jobs. Many people lost their jobs. And then they lost their homes, and they were homeless, and they were migrating from the east to the west. And this went on for an entire decade, right? What ultimately brought us out of that? Well, many people will credit World War II. But my dad, who again was a young guy, who really didn't know any better, he went from having nothing and trying to support his family, who were all out of work. That's his parents, and his siblings. Everybody was out of work, right? And he got a job doing something that my grandfather felt was below him. My grandfather was a master furniture maker. But my dad went to work in an assembly line, and he brought home some money. And for 10 years, the family struggled to get by, right? They brought home the smallest amount of money. But luckily, they had a house that they didn't lose. And they had a little income, and they made it through those 10 years. But what happened? The world fell apart at the same time, and it launched us into World War II when we finally could not avoid it, and we avoided it for years despite death and destruction all around the world, specifically emanating from Germany. But finally, we were called into World War II, and my dad was drafted at the age of 40, actually. And he fought World War II for 4 years or so, and finally came back and started again. But no one saw that coming, right? It's just like in the last recession, when home prices were skyrocketing, everybody was using their equity as an ATM to buy new cars and everything, and went out and bought bigger and bigger homes. No one saw it coming. First the market, right? Then the real estate, then the jobs associated with real estate. And then people stopped buying things, and you saw Starbucks close most of its stores, and you saw General Motors get in trouble for the first time. And you saw other major institutions scaling back, right? So a lot of people lost their homes in the last recession. When was that? A short 10 years ago, when most of the people I know in my neighborhood literally gave their houses back to the bank and lost all of their equity. And then people struggled through that, and slowly through quantitative easing and other Federal Reserve shenanigans, the market was propped back up, right? For the longest time we had zero interest rates, and things were just on a steady doldrum. And then we got some new leadership in Washington, and things looked better again. But the pumping continued. The debt expansion and explosion continued. Weakness around the world continues. And so, it really surprises me that people don't see the next major event about to happen. So I believe it is about to happen. I believe that our precious metals are insurance that whatever happens, we will have something to fall back on, especially if the dollar is destroyed, especially if inflation comes back to haunt us. We can't pay off the national debt, right? And now we're turning a cold shoulder to the rest of the world and saying, basically, let it burn, it won't hurt us. Well, that's what Herbert Hoover said, and it came back around to be the most destructive period in American history. And it's all repeating itself, right? Real estate turning down, markets turning down, the world falling, except now the whole world has this tremendous debt overload, where people have devalued their dollars and have printed fiat currency until it can't last anymore. It can't sustain confidence, and that's why other countries turn to the dollar, and it actually is paying a healthy return right now to buy bonds, U.S. bonds, but that is not going to last. It's just not going to last. So, when you think it could never happen, when you think that not in the United States, everything looks good, people have a job, it's going to happen. It's going to happen again.
To all.
He said winter was a real hard time. He said more than a few times he made money by picking up cow chips. Especially the poor would pay you what little money they could for cow chips. Depression made money with selling cow chips for fire.
My father didn't see it. I didn't see it when we were going into the early 2000s, when I was buying my McMansion, enjoying the American dream. I got to tell you, I wish I had the money I had put into my last house. Although I got back out at the recent top, I wish I had the money and effort and energy I had put into that asset, which was not mine, right? It belonged to the bank. And I think that's where we're at. We're at the precipice. I do think we're headed lower in everything out there. I also think that precious metals have seen a bottom, and I think it'd be a wise hedge to have on your assets to be invested in precious metals. So look around you, look for the signs. And although everyone will tell you they don't see it, if you follow truthful broadcasts, if you follow reality news, you will find that things are not what they appear. And of course, I wish you well if you're doing well and you're making money in real estate and you're making money in the stock market, you have a good job and you're getting a raise, but don't expect it to last forever. Have a parachute. That's all I have to say right now, but I often think about my father and the 25 years of hell that he went through. First as a young man when the Depression hit, and then finally when they clawed their way out of it, World War II, where literally the world almost ended, especially for free people. 25 years is what could happen. We've seen it before. Maybe 10 years cycles, tend to be 10-year cycles, at least in real assets and the economy. But don't think it can't happen. Don't think it. Prepare for it. Louie out. Have a great day.
I'm bound to ride that noise.